Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Goosebumps HorrorTown playthrough. This is part 0 to event 19. At the point of this recording, it already is revealed of what it is, but as per tradition, we're going to pretend the "oh, what it is" game, because it's always quite fun to play pretend, isn't that right, folks? Well, now that we have that little discussion out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about this little new update in August. Well, let me set the scene for you there, folks. Back in the day, a few months ago, before August came around, I was in the process of talking with my contact, and they decided to, and the contact in particular, also had in contact with other people. These other people being that of Sir Esquil, as I mentioned before, and others as well. Now, he ended up sending a few things, and this was a list of certain items of like, oh, we have an idea, what would you like, and vote for this, right? And this update ended up becoming one of many that got selected. The first of which that I can recall was something back in June. That's why we got the Phantom of the Auditorium. And this update came into fruition because, again, like the same voting system he had in place. It's very bizarre how he did it, but regardless, he did, and we got into this update here, which I'm going to be talking to you about right now. But before I do, I want to bring mention to the introduction. I decided to show you this image, which is the following preview has been hardly approved for all audiences by the Motion Picture Association of HorrorTown, at which case it's sent to both Pixowl's website as well as the Goosebumps website that, used for advertising purposes. Now, why was this posted here? Well, that was the only teaser that they did in the Facebook group. And a lot of people knew seeing something like this means that it was going to be a film update of sorts, and that is true. It is indeed a film. Now, I find that this was somewhat hilarious that they decided to do it like this, because if you don't know what this is referencing, whenever you see a trailer, you always see this image pop up. Usually it's green. Sometimes if it's really special, it's red, as to say that, ooh, this is a little bit too edgy for general audiences kind of deal. But regardless of that, the reasoning why this is so interesting, for the most part, is because, and well, I might as well go ahead and show you what it is. The update of 19 is a shocker on Shock Street. This is one of the more iconic books out of the Goosebumps library. It is well known for certain things, and especially for the fact that some elements from the movies actually came from here, namely one particular monster. I'll mention them a little bit later on, but let's go ahead and talk about some of the stuff that's based off of here. You might be looking at the main look and see Slappy and a bunch of robots, as well as what seems to be a very vague Mantis-looking creature. And then you see a bizarre man on the side there. I'll talk about this guy in a minute, but I might as well talk about the main feature or presentation, a shocker on Shock Street. This is based off of the book of the same name as seen here, and the most prevalent feature of the cover is that of the Mantis. The Mantis is not the main character, but it is a bit of a interesting side character. To best explain this, the story of the book is the fact that there are these two kids who are watching a movie, and it is established that the Shock Street is a series of films. So think of it like a trilogy of sorts. Well, not a trilogy, but like like different movies that taking place in this fictional world. So like Silent Hill, let's put it that way. Like there's different versions of Silent Hill, but it's taking place in the same universe. I'm trying to think of a better version of that, but it's the only thing that's coming up in my head right now. During the story, the main character, Erin, and her friend, Marty, decide to go and talk to her father, Mr. Wright. And Mr. Wright is a mechanical ingenious that's actually working on the project within the actual production company to make a theme park somewhat attraction based off of the property. So it's like a film studios of sorts. And you might be thinking when I'm describing this, it's like, it sounds vaguely familiar. Well, that's mostly because of the fact that this is heavily referencing Universal Studios. Namely, I believe Universal Studios Hollywood or Florida. I don't know which one of the two. I'm probably thinking maybe more on Hollywood because that's more of the whole film physique. And the fact that the whole tram system is like present in that area rather than in Florida. So I'm thinking to myself, RL was riding, one day he probably went to Hollywood and he went through one of the somewhat interesting tram rides and then thought to himself, animatronics in a theme park based on films going awry and right. I should turn that into a book. And Shocker on Shock Street was born. Literally the whole story is that these kids are basically test dummies that are going to ride this attraction tram before anyone else has done. Now, the whole interesting of this weird mechanic, like it's almost like, oh my god, this whole thing is real, right? Like, oh, they're like so realistic. And you get to see some infamous characters from the movies or in this little area, right? And it's like at first established like, oh no, you're not in danger. This is just for show. Until they get off the tram. And then that's when stuff hits the fan. When that happens, they start going into the whole, like, looking around to certain things. And at some point, the friend Marty ended up getting shocked. And she starts freaking out once she sees her father. She's like, what's going on? What's happening? And then the twist from the book comes in. Now, before the twist is revealed, it is pretty much shown that the director of this whole thing and, like, what's going on. It's so confusing. So, at first, it's supposed to make it seem like, oh, they're actually doing a filming at the moment because you get to see the director. And they're like, oh, no, we're filming, so that's why everything looks spooky and scary, right? And then she notices that the director's actually a robot. So then it's like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here, right? And then we go back to the whole scene with Marty falling down and, is basically, like, dead. And then, Aaron is freaking out. And then she starts to malfunction. And then this is when it's revealed that the Mr. Wright, didn't really have a daughter, but it is a actual robotic child and friend. The whole reasoning is that he designed robotic kids just to prove, or to basically dummy-proof this site before actual human beings come into it. So they make sure it's like kid-proof. And of course this failed, so they're like, yeah, I should have known that this whole thing wasn't going to work, because when my quote-unquote daughter was talking about her mother, I knew something was wrong, because something was wrong with her system. If you're ever curious about the show, though, I will say that there was an episode based off of this episode, and it's pretty faithful for the most part when it comes to the books. Now, mind you, budgetary reasons, it's a little bit dumbed down, like, not too intense, but they did their best with what they got. And the twist is still there. However, what I liked about this particular version of it is that they actually put a twist on the twist. Now, it's like vaguely what happened after the book ends. However, in the show, it is implied, like, they're making a new version of the robots to say that this one's going to be better. And then the old ones wake up and they're like, well, we don't want to be destroyed. So it's implied to say that they killed the Mr. Wright. And that's kind of dark, and I'm like, oh, kudos to you, TV people, to throw a twist at people who might have read the book and go, oh! I think they did a better job kind of solving the problem of making it go like, ooh, the spirit of RL lives long and prosper indeed. Now, I've mentioned before that I was going to get back to the Mantis, the cover art character that you've been seeing throughout the talking of during this time. And the thing is with the Mantis is that there was actually a giant real-life Mantis CGI creature in the movie, Jumanji movie, Goosebumps the movie, back in 2015. And what's funny about that is that, you know, it was during a chase scene, and you have this funny bit with, you know, Jackbot being RL. I was like, I don't remember writing this, and he's like, oh wait, now I remember. But what's even more interesting is that there is a downloadable app, as far as I know, which is a VR experience, and what it's supposed to be is that particular scene where you're sitting by RL as he's driving around town, basically getting chased by the giant Mantis. Now, I only bring this up because I like referencing certain things from the book of this update into the game of some sort. So I figured I might as well mention that here. As far as anything else is concerned with this book as other mediums, I can't think of anything on the top of my head that is pretty much standoutish, but that's the only thing I can think of at the moment. So you get a vague history about the story this is based off of, as well as the vagueness of the monster, or the iconic monster of the book, despite it only appearing for like a few chapters or a few pages and then gone. That's it. He's no longer available. Or the creature, as I say. I don't even know if it's gendered-ish. That's neither here or there. Now then, before we talk about what this update holds in store for us, let's talk about the man in the middle. Now, looking at this character, you might be thinking that this is the either Mr. Wright or perhaps maybe some sort of like a unique character of sorts, because it can be the director from the actual book. And you're right, it isn't. It is instead another character from another book making appearance in here in order to better emphasize this story. This character we see here, his name is R.B. Faraday. R.B. Faraday comes from a book called Fright Camp. The premise of this is pretty similar to that of the A Shocker on Shock Street, with a slight twist. Instead, what's going on is that in the book Fright Camp, there is a kid who goes to this certain camp, a horror camp, run by a famous horror director. And he's been famous because he's made these interesting films, and he's been known as the scariest man alive because of it. Now, he's made this little camp area to be like, oh, it's a horror camp. You get to be in the film kind of deal, right? Kind of like what's going on Shock Street. But what is cruel about this is that you find out that the director is purposely making this whole stuff happen, and it's implied that he's in on it. So the kids are getting scared out of all this stuff that's going on. And then it's revealed as like, oh no, I pranked you. This is not the first and last time we'll see this whole kind of story structure being presented in a book, because there was another one that's kind of similar to this. I think it was like a Series 2000 book of being in like Scream School. I think kind of had this similar stuff here. But that's neither here or there. Now, if you paid attention during my series of playthroughs, you may have noticed that with my involvement, I've made sure to sprinkle in some lore. Namely, R.B. Faraday's movies, as well as movies from the Shocker on Shock Street. And the sole purpose of that was so that when this update comes around, you'll be like, oh, it's connected. And it is. So, the reason why he's here is the same reason why this update is being made. And you might be wondering why Mr. Wright isn't part of the update, because he's a main feature villain, quote-unquote, from the book. But the reality is, we already have a character in the game that is not only a technical genius when it comes to robotics, but you may also say his name is very fitting to an update like this. Yes, I'm talking about Professor Shock. Professor Shock is the step-in person for this update. You'll also be surprised to note that Marty in the book is going to be represented by Marty in the game. And that means that the new character, besides the interesting character of R.B. Faraday, is that of Aaron. Aaron is going to be the freemium character that's going to be made available during this update, and that will be quite intriguing. And her story arc is somewhat interesting, especially with Marty being involved. Our Marty, you know, the bully. So it's quite interesting to see how this turns out. But with that being said, I'm getting ahead of myself. We should take a look into the patch notes to see what goes on, shall we? The Scariest Man on Earth presents Lights, Cameras, Horror. With Slappy as king of HorrorTown, renowned horror film director R.B. Faraday sets up the most terrifying amusement park on the promenade. What awaits those who dare cross his mysterious doors? Young Marty literally can't wait to find out the answer to this question and embarks on a spine-chilling adventure with an enigmatic girl named Erin. The story itself seems quite interesting, but let's see what is new with this update. After learning about with this description, let's talk about what is going to be put into this update. One of the interesting things is that they've decided to maximize store's capability. Now, I haven't found this out myself because I haven't stored any items, but I know that there was this tedious of only a select few number before we won't let you hold any more. They've decided to fix this, and I'm hoping to see they might fix this better sooner, with maybe having all similar items connected into one area, like, you know, having two in there. But, you know, I will leave that to there. But let's go ahead and talk about the main things you're interested in. The first thing I should note is the fact that this is our second, not only in a film, but also in somewhat of an amusement park setting as far as an event theming goes. The book is related to that of the one, A Shocker on Shock Street, with slight elements of Fright Camp sprinkled in there. Fright Camp itself is not a book with this update, but it kind of fits because, you know, characters in there. There will be a book available for A Shocker on Shock Street, and in order to unlock it, you will need to unlock Erin. Erin will be part of the story regardless, so you'll need to get her in order to complete it, so it's going to be a requirement. She is a freemium character, so you don't have to need to have her in particular. If you do complete the story, you get the scare decoration, the Cavern of No Return. You will notice that some of the items and themes of this is the fact that these are based off of actual properties of not only Faraday's films, but also Shock Street's. This is one of the reasons why I was looking forward to this update in particular. I will also make a big note that you will not need Faraday in order to complete the book, you just need Erin. So I'm glad to see that a premium-esque character will not be forced upon you when you're playing this update, so I'm glad to see that is a place. As usual, Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid is no longer in the collection anymore, and in its place is this event's book. Most likely than not, we'll see Be Afraid come back in the special tab at some point. I'm not sure when exactly, but give it a few months or maybe even so, we might see it pop in. Now, as I mentioned, there are two new characters and two new scenes introduced in this update. The first of which is, well, the freemium, which I basically told you, which was Erin, and you'll need the event's currency of 50,000 in order to get it. The event currency this time looks like shock batteries. The premium character this time around will be R.B. Faraday. Now, he is worth a very pretty penny, and I will be telling you, you'll probably see my reaction in part 1 for sure. Now, that being said, the interesting part about this is that you will need both of these characters in order to actually activate one of the scenes, or the event scene, in this case, Cavern of the Living Creeps. Unfortunately for you, you'll need Faraday in order to get 75% of the drop. If you don't, you'll only be forced with Erin, who only gives you 25. So you can see that if you have both of these characters, you'll get these dropped item, no guard, no problem. But you can see, because of how high priced Faraday is, it's kind of touchy. He's probably the most expensive character we have thus far in this update. And that's saying something. Now, one thing I'll mention is that if you do get Faraday, then you'll be guaranteed the grand prize, which is, this time, Shockdro's House of Shock. And it looks interesting enough. And you may also notice during the showing of both the Cavern of No Return and the scene is that there's a track going around. This is done on purpose because the gimmick of this update is that you can build your own little theme park amusement attraction type deal with things going in and out of certain areas. And I thought this was a very creative way of kind of seamlessly blending stuff in here. Now, besides the main event area, there are 2 new scenes that you can get that are freemium, both being Wolf Boy and Wolf Girl. These 2 characters are going to be made available for event currency. One of them, being Wolf Boy, will be cheaper than Wolf Girl, who is going to be a little bit more expensive. However, what I'll mention is that both these characters will drop the same item. So you don't need both of them in order to get something. You just need the one. And if you get both of them, then you get the same item twice as faster. That's the only thing you need to note here. And the last but not least that I'm going to mention about this update is the fact that the new special book being added is, if you can get this, Welcome to Dead House. Welcome to Dead House is coming back, and my god, I am very intrigued to talk about this one when it pops in. As you'll probably mention before, last year I had a problem when it came to Mr. Fleshman being useless, and then Compton was the same here. In fact, mostly because of his whole shtick of like, oh, he doesn't animate anymore. So he was like a character I liked. They fixed him. You'll need to buy the book though, but when you do get it, you get to have his animation. So they're back finally. But that's the only drawback, unfortunately. I will also mention this. A lot of people were wondering and curious about, once a book gets added, will the old one be pulled up? No. It's been confirmed by my contact that these books are staying in the up game. So what's going to happen is that eventually they're putting all the old events back into special books. And the idea of it is that they'll be switching around each time, or you can just buy them outright. You can only get one per weekend, but they always show up a weekend, so that's going to be the only thing that's going to be unique about them. But other than that, they're going to be staying, and that will be interesting for the most part due to the fact that when it comes to the events moving forward, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And with this update, you get to see what they have in mind as far as how they're going to be setting this up. I won't say anything just yet, but what I will tell you is that they brought back a very old feature to the game, and it seems like it's only focusing on a certain element. And I'm intrigued to see how this goes for future books, especially ones with longer names. But hey, they managed with this one, so I won't give them credit for that. So that is it for this updates 101. I hope you did enjoy a little bit of information of regards to what this update's going to have in store. If you'd like to learn more about certain things as far as what is this update all about, or even for the matter if you want to learn more about the books that these 2 characters come from, you can take a look down below. I provided you with a Goosebumps Wikipedia archive of them. I know one particular person who works on it will be very happy about that. But other than that, that's about it. So I'll be seeing you in part 1 when we take a look into a shocker on Sock Street. So until then, I'll be Grim, and I'll be seeing you next time for Goosebumps HorrorTown for a shocker on Sock Street. Shocking, isn't it?